Hi, I'm Stuart Malina, Music Director of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra, here for another episode of Conversations with the Maestro. Today we feature a conversation with our Associate Conductor and the Music Director of our Youth Orchestra, Mr. Greg Woodbridge. But before we get to that, I'd like to mention just a couple of things coming up. On May 22nd, we'll be releasing our final Masterworks performance of the season. This will feature music primarily for strings, but also including some woodwinds this time. We'll be doing a symphony by Mozart. We'll be doing a beautiful serenade by Robert Fuchs, a lyric for orchestra by George Walker, and also a beautiful sinfonietta, a small symphony by Malcolm Arnold. Please do join us for that. And then just a few weeks after that, we will be releasing on June 5th our final Pops concert of the year. This will be music for strings that comes from the movies, including beautiful music by Mozart and also the suite from the movie Psycho. So please do look out for those things. You can see information at www.harrisburgsymphony.org. Well, on with our interview. Let's go to Greg. Hey, Greg, it's wonderful to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this is a little bit of a departure for us, I suppose. We've had a number of guests so far, most of them musicians in the orchestra. But today we're featuring you, and you've been such an integral part of all of the operations of the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra. So why don't we start with what is your position and what are the many different facets of it?
So my title is Associate Conductor, and that's about half of the job, and the other half is being Music Director of the Youth Orchestras. And as Associate Conductor, it's really to assist you and the musicians in whatever we need in the course of rehearsals or performances. Of course, the biggest part of the job is that I have to be prepared on all of the scores. Should something happen to you, either a plane is delayed or heaven forbid, an illness.
It has happened.
And yes, we've been really close a couple of times. But fortunately, or unfortunately, I'm not quite sure. It depends on how you view it, but you're in excellent health all the time, which is
fortunately, knock on wood.
Sometimes there's weekends and you're like, oh, well, I really don't want to conduct the Strauss Heldenleben for the first time in a performance, things like that. But, in the course of our rehearsals, probably the biggest part of the job is being the ears of the orchestra and being your ears in the hall. And this is common with professional orchestras. I mean, I know you know this, but for the
of course,
our viewers, that it's very often that they will have the assistants listening to the acoustic in the hall, because what you're hearing on stage is more often than not what the audience is hearing. And in addition to getting questions from you as we go through the rehearsals, I also enjoy getting questions from the players at break time or after performances. They'll ask for some feedback, which is really nice. I mean, I feel really good about that they trust me enough and that they have enough respect for my ears and for my opinion that they see.
Well, I think you've earned that over the years that you've been with the orchestra. How long have you been with the Harrisburg Symphony?
Oh my gosh. I forget. I think it's 8. Is this my 8th season? I think
it's certainly something like that.
Yeah, 11. I think 2012 was the first year. So do we count last year? I don't know if we count last year at all.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. So that's the job of me as an assistant, and also I try to meet the patrons. Try to hang out with our board members. We have a tremendous board, as you know.
Yes,
and
we do.
They're really wonderful to talk to and to share ideas with, and to share reactions to the concerts at our Maestro circles. And it's just a wonderful opportunity for me. It's a wonderful job. And as as music director of the youth orchestra, now we get into some nittier, grittier kinds of things, because we're dealing with not just I'll call them the high school level ensembles, so the high school age kids, but we also have the orchestra of the junior strings, and now we have an elementary strings as well. So I'm kind of, the overseer of these orchestras, and we are in contact, the conductors and I, to discuss as the year is going on, ideas for the following season, how we want to grow the program. in particular with my ensemble, I have about on a good year a little over 100 musicians sometimes in that room rehearsing and on stage, and that's a lot of personality in one space, and it's a very thin tightrope to walk because you have to lead the rehearsals in such a way that you are challenging the students who are really advanced, but you're not so overwhelming for the students that are less experienced that they don't enjoy it, you know. In fact, it's one of my prime criteria when they audition is, can they enjoy the experience and grow from it, or are they just thrown into the deep end and it's just, too much for them? And that wouldn't be.
Well, and I imagine that they're all very accomplished players, but there still is a wide range of abilities.
Yeah.
Is that something that's difficult for you to balance so that it's a good experience educationally and musically for all of the students?
Yeah, and it's usually just mainly because of age. It's not that, we have students who are terrible. It's just that they're only, some of them are only 14 years old, so they just haven't had the benefit of experience. And between 14 and 18 years old there is huge growth that happens. So you can get a very disparate level of experience. And so, along with that is also choosing music for the ensembles, which is probably the thing that I spend the most time doing. It's kind of like the axiom: if you have 8 hours to chop down a tree, you'll spend 7 hours sharpening the axe. And choosing the right music is exactly that, because it's either going to make my own rehearsal process much more enjoyable, or it's going to be a real challenge. So again, it's like trying to hit the bullseye, pieces that are exciting for the kids, that they want to play it, they have something to learn, and are also just they need to be fun. I know that's kind of a dirty word among serious musicians sometimes.
Oh, goodness gracious! If it's not fun, why do it?
Yeah, and so I can even make percussion fun for these kids. So we did that quite nicely. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much my job with the symphony. So.
And you do a wonderful job of it. So let's actually stay on this. Normally we talk about your biography first, but we'll come to that a little bit later. But
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the youth orchestra, this has been a very different kind of year. I mean, obviously you can't put 105 students together in a room for 2.5 hours to rehearse on every Monday night. So how have you gone about maintaining a program that still has meaning for the players, that fits into the new requirements because of the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, we first wanted to honor the requirements that were set forth by the board and the educational committee, and also which are following directly in line with CDC guidelines. So in order to do that, we had to limit the number of players that were in the room at the time. And when we started off the year, at the time it was 25 people in the room. So that would mean 24 players plus myself, spaced 6 feet apart. Fortunately, we rehearsed at Trinity Lutheran in Camp Hill. So shout out to them for
they've been really generous
with their space and their time to give us that room. So we have a large room to do that in. And Mark Huntsberger, our director of education, and Matt, our executive director, went themselves and measured out the room 6 feet. And I think they even marked the floor to make sure that we could do this.
Yeah.
But then to pare the orchestra down from 100 players down to 24, we can't have this just 24 students out of the 100. It would be sort of unfair. So we decided that we would do it in cycles and we would rotate the students through. So we extended the evening. So normally it's a 7 to 9:30 rehearsal, and we came in earlier, and then we had a half an hour break to let the place air out, and then we would bring in group number 2. And so we were able to have 2 groups. So that was 48 kids. And then we had a third group then so it was mathematically weird, but we worked out that we had 3 divisions of the orchestra and we rotated them through, so that each group was offered 2 cycles, 2 performances in the year.
And all with their own individual repertoire.
Yeah. And that was the other thing, is that the number of pieces that I had to do and rehearse actually doubled. So the night got, for me, and this was totally fine, the night got longer. So I was in rehearsals for 3 hours instead of 2.5. So, big deal. and then we had twice as much repertoire. But the good thing about it was that because we had such a small group, I was really able to finely tailor the needs of that group and choose repertoire based on that. And so with only 24 people to please at a time, the chances of losing anybody for lack of interest, was a lot slimmer. So that actually worked out really well. In addition to the fact that there are only 24 of them, so they could almost get individualized attention from me. I could walk through the orchestra and I could point out things to individual players. With 100 people in the room, you can't do it, and there's just not enough time. And I really wish that we could. I know that we will be playing some excerpts from our fall performance, but I've often said I really wish that an audience could hear the first rehearsal and then hear the concert, because for me and for youth orchestras in general, I think it is all about the process. I mean, we of course want to be as excellent in the product as we can be, but what the audience doesn't know is how far the group came. So you can have a performance that to most ears or basing it off of a median would be just okay, that wasn't bad. But if you'd heard where the kids were at the first rehearsal, and you could see the length of that journey and how far they really came, and things that they could do in the performance that they never could have done at the first rehearsal, that for me is the magic. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get to appreciate that part of the magic.
That's a fascinating thought, and it makes a lot of sense, because when you're conducting the Harrisburg Symphony, as you have on several occasions, it's a very different thing. I mean, it's all about outcome. I mean, you do what you need to do in rehearsal to reach the outcome that's desired. Whereas with the students, it is an educational program. And so it's about the day-to-day, week-to-week progress. Are there other ways that the experience is different as a conductor? I assume that it is a very different experience for you working with the students as it is working with the professional orchestra. But given that you've done both and you've rehearsed both, are there differences in the way you prepare, differences in the way you approach rehearsals?
Yeah, I don't know if our audience knows this about you, but Stuart is, and I'm talking to the audience, I'm not talking to you, Stuart, but Stuart is incredibly generous with his time and with his advice and sharing his experiences. And I remember the first performance that I was preparing the score for, and after the first rehearsal, my head about exploded. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I mean, I didn't know what to make of it, because it was, where do you begin when the orchestra that you're now leading is, well, probably at that level, they were the best that I had ever conducted. Probably, well, still are. Okay. So you stand on the podium for a first rehearsal, and it's far better than any performance. It's almost recording level. Now, obviously, there's things to work out, but a youth orchestra, certainly they're never going to get there because they're not professionals. But even their performance level, there are weeks that you can grow with that music. There's also a different type of preparation on the score, in that with a youth orchestra, I have to know exactly how to teach everything on the page, because if the hand goes up, how does this rhythm go? Well, a professional orchestra is not going to ask you that. They're going to know, they're going to have their parts prepared. And so I think with the youth orchestra, you're dealing much more detailed work, and there is teaching going on of technique. There's a lot of teaching on how to follow a conductor. I spend a good deal of time on that. And there's also a good deal of time spent on how to play together. Even though you're 100 kids, how can you play like chamber musicians, but in a large symphony orchestra? Because those are the best orchestras in the world, are the orchestras where the players are really well versed in chamber music. So I try to incorporate all of those. You stand in front of the Harrisburg Symphony, you don't even have to think of that. You have to think of the much bigger picture issues. You have to think about the phrasing. You have to think about the sound. You have to think about the color. You have to think about the articulation. Then you have to think about what it's sounding like in the hall. So those issues are first and foremost when you stand in front of the Harrisburg Symphony. That's what you're starting with, And with a youth orchestra, you're very fortunate if you can get to that. So that's kind of the difference. And it's not that the kids are bad. It's just,
Oh, not at all. I've been to every single youth orchestra concert in
yeah,
the last 6 years, and they sound awesome.
yeah, and they are good. But it's just that's the difference. That's the difference between conducting a professional orchestra is, even the way that I prepare the score for Harrisburg Symphony is a much more eagle-eye view of the piece than it is with the youth orchestra. Now, I know it in the same level of detail, but I don't have to worry about how to teach it. And I don't have to predict, like with the youth orchestra, you try to predict what the problems are going to be and how you would solve them. And of course, I've been doing it for 20 years, so I'm very fast with that. I can look at it and know this is going to be an issue, but I know how to fix it in the course of a rehearsal. You don't have to even have those thoughts with Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
some
let's take this opportunity and listen to the orchestra play. What are we going to hear first?
Okay, so in our fall concert, one of the earliest pieces that we did a few movements from the Tchaikovsky String Serenade. So we are going to present a portion of that to you right now. Please enjoy.
Well, I'm always amazed and inspired watching the youth orchestra play. Now, I'm speaking on many levels because, as you know, both of my kids came through the Harrisburg Symphony Youth Orchestra program, and both of them worked with you. And by the way, both of them love working with you. But every time I go see the orchestra, I what inspires me is not just the level of musicianship and not just the joy that I feel at seeing young people playing, but the intensity of the the effort on their part. They are really wholeheartedly diving into this very challenging music. How does that make you feel when you do a concert with kids like that?
It's funny. I'm not taking credit for this in any stretch, but I think they take their cues from me in that, I didn't have this level of youth orchestra experience when I was their age. Like I didn't have any of this wonderful, I had great teachers, okay,
Mm.
but we were not an area that had a youth orchestra like they have. We didn't have the school programs that these students have. We didn't have the number of private teachers that are available to them. And I think I come to that with incredible gratitude on their behalf that they get to do this. And I always try to impress upon them that they should never take this for granted. And ironically, one of the last sort of chiding speeches I gave to them was, don't ever play it halfway. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. You could leave this room and for whatever reason, it might be the last time you've been in an orchestra rehearsal. And then, of course, the next week we were shut down because of the pandemic. So I felt like I kind of
That'll teach you.
I had something to do with it. It's the Irish curse,
But
So
it is a really good point, and it kind of is along the same lines. I'm sure I've shared this quote from Robert Shaw with you, that every time you perform, it's going to be someone in the audience's first time hearing the music, and it's going to be someone in the audience's last time hearing the music.
that's right.
But I've never thought of it in the other way, that it could actually be your last time playing the music, and that does make it very special.
It does, and like I said, I didn't have these experiences available to me. So, but I'm also a very passionate musician, and when I played in orchestra, kind of giving that up right now. But when I did play violin with the York Youth Symphony, with the York Symphony, and other groups going through the my university years, every concert I was just like so in love with the experience of being a part of this thing, and I want that for the kids. So when I stand up there in front of the kids, that's the energy that I'm trying to put out. Some nights I'm more successful than others. That, we really need to do this. Like, why do it halfway? Why are we here if we're not going to make the most beautiful music that we can, that we are able to make with whatever gifts we bring to that experience, right? Wherever you are right now, give it all. I mean, you can't play percussive halfway.
Well, it's easy to see how they would be inspired. But speaking of inspired, we have a special guest today. Do you want to introduce our special interview?
Yeah, so tonight we're going to be meeting a very bright, very charming young woman, sophomore at Cumberland Valley High School. This is one of our star violists, Ms. Madison Engel.
So welcome to Madison Engel. How are you doing today, Madison?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think you know why we have you here, to talk a little bit about the Harrisburg Symphony Youth Orchestra. But before we do that, let's hear just a little bit about you, and where do you live? Where do you go to school? What instrument do you play?
Well, hi, my name is Madison. I go to Cumberland Valley High School and I play the viola. I've been playing since 4th grade.
Wow, so did you start on viola?
Yep.
And what made you want to choose the viola?
Really just a coincidence, kind of. It was a school assembly and they were introducing the instruments to us one by one, and I was like, that sounds cool. I think I'll do that,
Well, I think you chose a wonderful instrument. It's a very beautiful instrument indeed. So who is your teacher? Because I always want to give a shout out to the private teachers.
Yeah, my private teacher is Mrs. Grignoli. She is amazing.
And who is your teacher in school for strings?
My director is Mrs. Schramm.
Oh, fantastic. I know her very well. She is also fantastic. One of the legends of string programs in high schools in this area. So how did you come to know about the Harrisburg Symphony Youth Orchestra?
I think through Mrs. Grignoli. Yeah, she mentioned it as an opportunity and she helped me prepare. So.
And tell us a little bit about your experience. What are the things that you like best about playing in the youth orchestra?
Oh, it's such a great experience just for having fun and also a learning experience, I can tell you definitely, at least this year, it's one of the highlights of my week, as it's one of the only things that I do this week. So it's
Well,
really
let's
fun.
stick with that for a moment, because it
Yeah.
has been somewhat of an odd year.
Okay.
This is not your first year in the youth orchestra, right?
No, yeah.
And so what has it been like this year compared to previous years?
Well, it's definitely been shorter, which is unfortunate, but necessary, I guess.
Mhm.
What's good about it is we still get the experience, we still get all of the fun, and of course the beautiful music. So that is really nice to still have that in the midst of all of this chaos.
Yeah, it's exciting that you've been able to do that. So one more question for you that I think is actually one of the most important questions when you're dealing with young people playing in a youth orchestra, but you still have a full school load. How do you balance all of this, and what place does music have in your life in a larger sense?
Well, I mean, when it comes to balancing, it's music is always something that I've wanted to do. So it hasn't really been an issue with figuring out when to do certain things, for me at least. But I can definitely say that music is a huge part of my life personally. And it's a great experience that introduces me to a lot of new people. And it really just gives me a lot of opportunities to learn. And it's a place where I can find comfort and grow at the same time, where normally those two things are kind of separate. So it's really a
That's a
great.
fantastic answer. And so you're a sophomore, correct?
Yes.
So do you have any idea yet what direction you want your life to go in? Do you have a sense of career paths, or is it too soon for that?
I mean, I'm starting to think about it. I have options, but it's comforting to know that music will be in my life no matter what I do.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you so much, Madison, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and good luck with the end of the school year and going forward. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Well, you had said she was charming. She actually is one of the most well-spoken and poised young women I think I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, and as a player, from the conductor standpoint, this is what I love to see, and what Madison exudes when she plays is there is that light in her eyes. There's that excitement about when I give her a gesture, to the section, she's right there. I mean, this is like just the
Yep.
best feeling as a conductor, because you are able to connect with a player, and have a musical moment. And so she's one of those. We have many of them in the orchestra, but she is one of those. And
Well,
we have to represent our viola section. So we
well,
make a lot of
thank you very much for making her a part of this interview. So now let's go back and talk a little bit about your upbringing and how you came to music. Where did you grow up, and how did you come to music?
Yeah, so don't hold it against me, but I did come from Scranton, Pennsylvania, born and raised, and I like to joke that it's a great place to be from. But truly, the people there are really wonderful, and I was very fortunate that I had an excellent piano teacher. And being the youngest of six, my mother recognized that music was important, and so my oldest brother played the piano. He eventually went on to become a songwriter. And I grew up with a piano in the house with music. It was strange for me to go to other people's homes for them to not have a piano. So like it was just sort of like breathing. And so when I was 7, my mother said to me, "Well, we're going to change the piano teacher for some of the older siblings. Would you like to start piano?" And we were not a well-off family, so this was a bit of a sacrifice, and some it took some undertaking. And I said, "Well, sure, I'll start it." And I took off, and I didn't know. Like I look back on, I look back on myself now, and I'm like, "Wow, I really did know some things. I was pretty accomplished for my age, but I didn't know it because there was no one around me that I could compare myself to. So I was just kind of happily going along with it. And then when I was in high school, I was actually going to go into law. And I don't know why. It must have been because the television show LA Law was very popular at the time. And it just looked like something fun. And I had some relatives who were lawyers and they seemed to be doing well. And I thought, well, I like to discuss things and debate things. And maybe this is the path for me. And I thought I was being very responsible also. My mother looked at me once. We were on a bus to New York City. We were going to go and see a show. And she looked at me and she said, I don't understand why you don't want to go into music. And I was shocked. And I thought, well, now what do I do? I was already accepted to Penn State for a liberal arts degree. So I went home and I looked in the booklet because it wasn't online. And they had a music program. And I thought, well, okay, maybe what I'll do. Actually, this was her advice. She said, go and get your music degree while you're young, and then go into law school after that, and see what happens if you still want to go into law. So I went to Penn State, auditioned, found they had a tremendous piano teacher there on the staff. She was a graduate of the Paris Conservatory, and she had studied with Brendel, and she had studied with Paul Bedore-Scotta. She actually came over from Paris as his assistant when he came to Madison.
Cool.
And it was about the same time, actually, that your teacher was there.
That's right. Mr. Mueller and Paul Bedore-Scotta were very good friends.
Yeah, and so Marilyn Doss was her name. They had worked together many times. So there was some funny. I have a funny story that I think I've shared with you before about meeting Mr. Mueller. And when he asked me who my piano teacher was, I told him, and he was like, "Oh, she was a lovely woman when I knew her," something like that. So, which she was, and a fierce pianist, and has a lot of recordings to her name. And it was under the Vox label, which back in the 70s was kind of just starting out. But anyway, she was probably the most influential musician on my life, at that point. And it was probably within a week that I was at Penn State, and I said, I don't know how I could possibly do anything else. So I knew that there was always in the back of my mind, I wanted to be a conductor.
Yep.
I was also a violinist. I was probably equally good at the violin as I was at the piano. And then after the first year of practicing 8 hours a day, I said, this is crazy. I'm getting mediocre at two things. Let's get good at one. So I kept the violin only as a tool so that I could speak string to the ensembles, which is really helpful even with the professionals. But also gives me a great understanding of how to get the sound that I want, because it is mostly strings, obviously. And then after I graduated with my degree, I got a degree in education. That was sort of my safety. And stayed on for the piano performance degree, and stayed on and started the conducting work. And in addition to doing my university studies, the most important things I did for conducting were the master classes and the summer workshops that were offered. And
talk a little bit about that, because I'm not sure that our audience really knows what a conducting master class would be like. What happens at a conducting masterclass?
Well, they put you in front of a group and they strip down any ego, any good feelings you ever had about yourself as a musician, and then they try to build you back up. But no, seriously, what it is, and it depends on the format, but the most common format is they start you off with either pianos or orchestra, or a small orchestra, like a string quartet, we'd say, mainly for financial reasons. But some of the systems were based off of what they would do in the St. Petersburg Conservatory. It was two pianos, and I don't know what it was like for you at Curtis, but there was a student orchestra, but it was very rare that they got in front of it. And actually, the clarity that is needed to keep two pianists together, where the sound is immediate and there's no bloom, there's no sneaking in, so if the conductor is inaccurate, the orchestra can still somehow pull it together. With two pianists, you can't. So if you're not clear and they're not clear what your intention is, then you hear it immediately. So I really like the two piano system. Although at first, when I was younger, of course, I wanted to conduct a big orchestra right away. This is what we want. But basically, you stand up in front of either the pianist or the orchestra for a certain amount of time. And the master teacher or the guest teachers there will let you conduct for a little bit, and then they will stop you and they will pinpoint something about your conducting. They will try to work on that with you. In some of these settings, the time that you're on the podium is very limited. It's like 8 minutes, where you get 8 minutes with an orchestra. I mean, it's crazy what we have to do as conductors to try to learn our craft. Probably not unlike surgeons, like you can practice on the fake mannequins, but to really get in there and do it, I mean, you're talking about, in the surgeon's case, life or death, but you get the analogy. So it's tricky to learn. The the best teachers were the ones who would take the students with whatever they brought to the table or brought to the podium and say, well, you need to learn to conduct, let's say, smaller. Your gesture is too big. I have these big pterodactyl-like arms that are very difficult for me to control. And I think conductors like Leonard Bernstein, conductors that were maybe a little bit shorter in stature than I am and a little bit more compact, for me, they always seem to get like the most power out of the orchestra. And so, yes, I mean, I can have this elegance, but sometimes I have an issue with trying to get, real power from the orchestra. So like for me, that was what I had to work on. And for other people, it was the opposite. It was they need to be less stiff and they need to be a little bit more elegant, and a little more flowing. But they can, some teachers can be unkind if they're impatient. And you've experienced this, I'm sure.
Once or twice.
Yeah. And then, but the worst part is that you're standing up there in front of your peers. And so if, you have to approach this with a certain confidence, but then you can't have too much confidence or they think you're arrogant, and orchestras hate that, and it's not about that.
Yep.
But I think of the master classes that I took, the most beneficial ones were the ones who were students of Elia Musin, who was the great conducting pedagogue at the St. Petersburg Conservatory. He taught Temirkanov, he taught Bichkov, he taught, some of the younger generation would be like Tugan Sokiev. But all the way back, he was teaching until he was 93, and then he only stopped because he died. He was just old. So his students and one of his best students took his method and boiled it down into a very skinny little tome of the basics of Musin's technique, and it has helped me immensely. And this guy never had any other teacher but Musin, and so he's like completely pure. He's just what he teaches you. And he's an Italian. But he speaks Russian. He speaks Italian, and sometimes he has the personality of a Russian teacher. That really laser focused on something. But he treats all the students the same. He treats the students as if they are. He's going to be just as challenging with everybody, which is really nice. There's no like, oh, well, here comes Greg. He's a beginner, so we'll be nice to him. No, why do you do that? What is that you're doing? Get these kinds of questions. And probably the funniest lesson that I ever had with one of these master classes was 30 minutes. I stood on the podium for 30 minutes. I didn't wave my arms once. It was for Beethoven's Eroica. I didn't get to start it because he stood there and he says, "This is not Beethoven. You're not standing like Beethoven." So I was like, okay, well, how about this? You try to finally at the end of 30 minutes, I said,
Wow.
Yeah, so it can go ridiculous too, and that depends on the teachers, and sometimes the teachers fight among each other too, like with what they want to teach the student, and that can get a little bit uncomfortable too. You're just standing there like the third party, and they're all talking about you, But the benefit of that is also that you get to watch not only yourself, but you get to watch everybody else go through.
Oh, sure.
And one of the students that I was with, we were very close at the time, Carlos Prieto. Probably a name that he's
having quite a career.
Astounding. And first we were at the Monteau School together, and then the very following year we met up again in Russia, and there were like 5 of us at this thing, and we hung out together. And he's absolutely charming and wonderful, and kind of sad we haven't kept in touch, but it was fascinating because as he would play in the orchestra, and he would say, it was very bizarre for me as a player. You gave this gesture and I didn't want to play the chord when I thought I did, but then that gesture made me do it when I didn't want to do it. And now I understand that this method leaves me with control. He said, but I don't understand how it works, but I just know that I exploded off the string when you showed me. So it's nice. There's a nice collegiality among conductors, certainly as we're coming up, that you don't often find with some other instrumental groups.
That is true. So you did this for a while, and then when you graduated, did you immediately come to this area? What led you into the greater Harrisburg region?
Yeah, so there was, I got a job teaching down in Chambersburg after I came out of my master's. I needed work, and somebody said, listen, there's this job down in Chambersburg, this big orchestra program at this big school district, and I think you would really like it, certainly as a first job. And so I went down there, and I was there for, I think, 2 years. And I met somebody in Harrisburg who said, come up and guest conduct this really top-notch youth orchestra called the Wednesday Club Youth Orchestra. And I said, okay. It was all strings, and it was mainly string players of Suzuki teachers in the area who were not having an orchestra experience for whatever reason. And I was amazed. I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so anyway, the conductor, who was at the time Pam DeWall, and
she played with us, of course.
And she brought me in, and she slowly started stepping away and saying, I love to start things and let somebody else do them, and I want you to do this. And at the same time, one of the parents of one of the players, Barb Lewis, told me that there was a job opening in Hershey, and that Ron Schaefer, who is the leader of that program there for, gosh, I think at that point it was 30 some years, was retiring. And I had played for Ron in some festivals when I was a high school student. And I remember seeing on his resume, or his bio, that he had gone to Penn State. And that was one of the reasons why I thought that I would be okay at Penn State. You know, here's this conductor who went there and did this. And of course, Ron Schaefer was not my predecessor, my pre-predecessor at Harrisburg Youth. And so upon his retirement, I immediately applied for the job, had this crazy, bizarre interview, and then immediately was on a plane to go to Russia to take my master class, and got the job. And I was there for 21 years at Hershey, building that program.
Yes, and what a program you built.
Thank you. It was not that it was small when I got there, but the district was small. You know, also the district has grown the size of another school district, you know, in the last 20 years. But, you know, I started with 40 some kids in the high school orchestra. And by the time that I left, there were 125 in the just the string section. So, and that's
incredible.
I also had the middle school orchestra, and that's a whole different beast too. But so in addition to the teaching, I was also starting to do these youth orchestras and community orchestras on the side. And then sure enough, the advertisement came that the job was open for the Harrisburg Symphony. And uniquely, it was the first time that Harrisburg Symphony was offering the assistant conductor portion of the job description. So it wasn't just the youth orchestra, it was the assistant conductor as well. And that was very, very exciting for me, because I always want to push myself to keep on learning and to exist at that level, you know, at that level of musician. So that was really exciting. And in fact, sort of a dream come true, that I would have this opportunity to work with that level of orchestra. And then I'm going to butter you up again, to work with you and to watch the way that you work with the orchestra these past 8 years. I mean, I've seen you in literally hundreds of rehearsals.
That's true.
And I have learned so much from that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, it's true. I mean, you're a gifted teacher. I know that you are a performer, but you're a gifted teacher, as someone who would know.
Thank you.
Yes. I really hope that at some point in your career, that you get to work with young conductors on a regular basis.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
The future is not yet written.
That's true. But that's my story.
Well, why don't we take another break and hear another selection from the Harrisburg Symphony Youth Orchestra? Do you want to introduce this one?
So this will be another selection. In that concert, we did the Serenade for Strings, which is a lengthy piece. So we'll hear another selection, another movement of that piece.
Wonderful. absolutely beautiful, and congratulations on all the amazing work with the youth orchestra, particularly this difficult year. It's what you've been able to pull off is very inspiring. So thank you for that. So let's change gears just a little bit and talk about not music. What do you like doing when you're not doing music? And actually, there's not a lot of time in your life really, because you've got multiple things happening all at once. But what are the things that you do just for fun?
Yeah, for fun. Actually, this whole past year is sort of there's always a blessing in these kinds of experiences, right? And so I think the blessing for me was that I didn't have rehearsals every night. Sometimes we had these like Zoom meetings and things like that, but I wasn't out 3 times a week. On a Harrisburg weekend, I wasn't gone the entire weekend, and so that was a blessing to be home. And so then, yeah, what do you like to do? Well, I have a variety of things that I enjoy doing. Number one, I really enjoy cooking.
And you're a good cook.
And thank you. And as are you.
Oh, thank you.
My kids joke with me. They're like, "Dad, it's 9 a.m. and you haven't asked us what you want for dinner yet." You will be done with breakfast. I'll be like, "What are we going to make for dinner?" It's for me, it's a project. It's, if you don't start it at 1 o'clock, and if the house doesn't smell like onions and garlic at 3:30, then you're failing in your day. So I really like those things. I like, languorous cooking experiences, shall we say. The more pots that you can dirty, the better. And of course, if the more complicated the recipe, the better. So that's fun. Now, I don't do that all the time. I can cook, I can get dinner on the table in short time if I absolutely need to. But so I do enjoy cooking. I also enjoy in the springtime, especially now, the gardens are coming alive. So I love gardening. I love taking care of my lawn. And, you talk about going down a rabbit hole. I was watching this video on YouTube of this guy mowing his grass. I thought, oh, I've really lost it now. He was mowing his grass, but he was putting these like really beautiful stripes in them. And it's just like you see at the baseball stadiums. And so, I was watching this guy and he was explaining how you do it. And then he was explaining like, well, you need a particular kind of grass and you have to grow it in a particular kind of way. And you need this kind of fertilizer. You need this. Well, anyway, that was it. I went right down it. And so I really enjoy mowing my lawn, but it's really therapeutic. And you know what? At the end of it, you've accomplished something, in music and in the arts.
It is true.
It's never done. Even when the concert's over, there's always the next concert. You close one score, you open up the next one. It's never done. But grass, it gets done. And it's also neat that it's kind of like life. If you want to make the straight lines, now here's a little, I'm going to get a little poetic here. If you want to make the straight lines, you can't look at where you are. You have to look at where you're going. So that was a philosophy.
Yes, grasshopper.
Yeah, you like that. In the middle of mowing my grass one day, I was like, oh, okay. So I do enjoy that, but I also do enjoy reading. I love YouTube. I mean, I'm on YouTube all the time. There's so many great things. I mean, there's some junk on there too, of course, but there's so many great things. I'm always watching a concert or I'm watching a performance, interviews. I love documentaries. I love listening to podcasts as I'm falling asleep. I like walks. I like going to the woods and walking around the woods when I can. I have 2 incredible children, 13.
Yes, you do.
And they are just so much fun to be around right now. I'm very blessed that my daughter, she either went through her teen years like early and it's over, or there's a second wave coming. But like we are just in the best phase right now, and my children are very loving and they're very active in their school activities. So I am involved with that. We go and watch their sporting events that they play. I'm fortunate that right now I'm working at Lancaster Country Day School and we live right near the schools. So I can literally walk to work. I can walk to the athletic fields. We see the different families there. So, apart from music, I'm dad. And that's probably what I take right now the most pride in. My kid said to me the other day, it's kind of odd, but in talking to my friends, we're one of the few families who like actually eat dinner together.
Wow.
And I thought that, well, then I win.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me a little sad to hear that.
Yeah, well, but it's a blessing of what happened, this last year. We had all this time. So we are together, and that's where you just sit back and you listen to the conversations and how their day went, and you could really get a clue as to where they are mentally and emotionally, and it's great. It's a nice little litmus test.
It
So
is a
those are
beautiful part of
the things
life.
that I do. Yeah, but you are a great father to your children. When they were growing up, I was a witness to this, and in the many conversations when you would discuss how important that job is to you, and
Oh yeah,
you and Marty.
the most important.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway.
Well, it's wonderful. So lastly, before we end this interview, let's talk a little bit about the future. I like asking the interviewees, what do you see as the future of our art form? I mean, everyone's talking about these perilous times we're in, and maybe it's a time for reinvention. What do you see as the future of orchestral music?
I think we're going to come out of this bigger and better. And I don't think that everybody shares that same opinion. I have a friend that I was speaking to the other day who's involved with Broadway, and they're really nervous. There's,
Yeah.
of course, a plan to open up in the fall, but then are they going to keep the same contracts that they had before they shut down? There's a lot of unknowns. And I mean, obviously in the orchestra world, there is too. But I look at the resiliency of not just the Harrisburg Symphony, but all of these orchestras all over the world that have really tried to put something out there for the people. It started like a small grassroots thing, like the singers that were singing on the balconies in Italy, right? People need music in their life. So I'm very hopeful that once we are able to get back together in public, I really think it's just going to take off. It's going to be one of those things that maybe people took for granted, that we had this opportunity to get together and share this incredible experience. I mean, it doesn't matter how great your speakers are in your house. It isn't the same. It's not the same vibration that you have from hearing live music, any art form, from experiencing it live. And it's not just what you personally are seeing, but it's that shared experience among the audience. Everybody laughs at the same time. They get the same joke. There's a commonality there. You're enthusiastic at the end of a Beethoven symphony. You're excited. You walk out to your car. You're just like, like this. Everybody has that, and they share it together. And I think we've been missing it. I think everybody's really hungry for it. So I think our future I think we're going to be just fine.
Well, amen to that. I certainly hope that's the case.
I do too.
I would like to say that thank you so much for the years of great work for the Harrisburg Symphony Orchestra and the Harrisburg Symphony Youth Orchestra. I mean, I've benefited in so many ways, certainly through my kids whose high school years were so enhanced by their time with you. But also, I can't think of a single concert that I've done since you've started working with the orchestra where you haven't had a profound effect on the outcome. So many thanks for all of that. And I look forward to normality once again.
Yes.
But even in this year, what people probably don't know is when they see our final outputs, a lot of like what camera is on what player came from Greg. And that is a big job. And did you enjoy it?
I did. It was a completely different kind of work, right?
Yeah.
I had to do, which was to prepare the scores through a visual aspect, not just an oral one. But it was kind of neat getting to be the decider of how the audience was going to receive the music, because you can influence what people are hearing by what they're seeing.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, it was important that, in a particular solo shot that this obvious, I mean, it seems obvious, right? But in real time, when you have to call out those camera shots in real time, you're like 3 degrees removed, because the switcher has to tell the camera guy who to focus on. I have to give him the thing, prepare this camera in this amount of time. And it can be stressful, but it's a kind of stress I kind of like,
Yeah.
Well,
I think the result has been great.
It was another unique part of the job this year. So
yeah,
I learned a new skill set.
Thank you for that. And thank you very much for this whole interview. And I'll be seeing you very soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Greg.
Okay, Stu. Good night.
Thank you so much, Greg Woodbridge. And also thanks to Madison for her guest appearance in this interview. Next month, June, marks the 1-year anniversary of the beginning of this series of Conversations with the Maestro. We will be continuing to do these videos going forward into the future, and we very much look forward to meeting more members of our orchestra family. We will soon be making announcements about next season, the 21-22 orchestra season for both Pops and Masterworks, so please keep an eye open for that on our website, harrisburgsymphony.org. In the meantime, enjoy this beautiful spring weather, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.